Thank you for tuning in to this episode of BoxBox, Bot, an AI-generated podcast by a F1 fan who happens to be a technology fan too. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging headfirst into what feels like a really intense, kind of unpredictable build-up to Formula One's annual silly season.
Yeah, it feels different this year, doesn't it? More chaotic somehow.
Totally. And look, this isn't just going to be a regular deep dive. The sheer volume of news, the speculation, all the behind-the-scenes stuff, it's unlike anything we could have imagined, honestly. So just letting you know, this might be a slightly longer, maybe a somewhat extended deep dive as we, well, try to make sense of it all.
There's definitely a lot to unpack.
So our compass for navigating this journey through the F1 driver market and all the team dynamics, it comes from some really insightful sources. We've been digging into the analyses from well-known F1 YouTubers.
Yeah, guys who really know their stuff.
Exactly. Practical Rap. And you can find his channel by searching at F1 Newsteer. That's F1 NEWSTEEARE. And Cameron's channel is at Cameron Seed. That's CAMERON-CC.
Both excellent follows if you're into F1 deep dives. They've been right on top of this stuff.
Absolutely. They've been at the forefront, really dissecting every rapid development, offering perspectives that, cut through the noise. And that's pretty much what we're aiming to do for you today.
Let's give it a shot.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission today is basically to cut through all that noise, distill the most crucial insights, and try to understand what's truly driving the F1 paddock into this, well, extraordinary state of chaos.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, I think, is just how interconnected everything is. All these rumors, these decisions. Yeah. It's not just about one driver moving or one team making a change. It's like this complex, always evolving web of strategic moves and, well, counter moves.
Like a giant chess game.
Exactly. So we'll be trying to connect the dots, from the little details in driver contracts to the bigger picture of team management dynamics and explore those ripple effects across the whole grid.
Sounds good.
It really shows how dynamic Formula One is off the track too, just as much as on it, and, how everything is intrinsically linked.
All right, let's kick things off then with the absolute bombshell, the one that's been reverberating through the F1 world recently.
Oh yeah, that one.
This speculation reported by Karen Sissi, and he's drawing on info from motorsport.com's Ronald Ving. Now, for those who might not know, Ronald Ving isn't just, any F1 journalist.
No, he's seriously plugged in.
He's incredibly well connected, especially within the Verstappen camp. We're talking direct lines to Raymond Vermeulen, Max's manager. And even Jos Verstappen, Max's dad.
Yeah.
So that gives him incredible proximity to Max himself.
Yeah, proper inside track.
And what he's reported is this. Well, truly eye-opening potential move. George Russell from Mercedes to Aston Martin.
Right, which is huge in itself.
But then, by extension, this could pave the way for none other than Max Verstappen to Mercedes.
Wow. Just saying, it sounds wild.
I know, right? I know what some of you might be thinking. Max to Mercedes, George to Aston. That sounds like pure fantasy, like something out of F1 Manager.
Yeah, it feels almost unbelievable.
But let me just remind you of that old F1 truism. The saying that holds more weight than pretty much any contract in the paddock.
Yeah.
There's no smoke without F1 flame.
It's proven true time and time again.
Think back just a few months. Lewis Hamilton's seismic move to Ferrari. For years, people said that was an unbelievable rumor, a pipe dream, a fan's wildest fantasy.
Total speculation.
Yet here we are. We're watching him get ready to put on the red overalls next season. It is the prime example of how these previously unbelievable rumors can, and also do, come true in this sport.
Absolutely.
So if Hamilton's switch taught us anything, it's really never say never. Especially when sources with the kind of credibility Ronald Ving has start talking. This isn't just some casual whisper. It feels like a deeply informed piece of speculation.
Indeed. And to really unpack Max Verstappen's future in light of this, we need to dive into those contract nuances because they're way more complex than just an end date.
Right. It's not just 2028 and done.
Exactly. Max's contract with Red Bull officially runs through 2028. However, and this is the absolutely critical detail, it includes performance clauses.
Ah, the famous clauses.
The famous clauses. Helmut Marko, Red Bull's advisor, and Christian Horner, the team principal, they've both confirmed these exist. One such clause is apparently tied to Max's championship standing at certain points in the season.
Like the summer break, maybe?
The summer break is often mentioned, yeah, as a key trigger point for those evaluations. So basically, this means if Red Bull isn't performing up to a certain standard, Max potentially has an out.
Okay, that changes everything.
It does. Now, Christian Horner may be trying to project calm or, assert control. He's publicly said he wouldn't want to keep a driver based on just a piece of paper if they'd rather be elsewhere.
Interesting phrasing.
He even went further, saying, if you've got to refer to a contract, you've got a problem. It's about a relationship and their trust.
Right.
Now, on the surface, that sounds pretty magnanimous, doesn't it? Emphasizing loyalty over legal stuff.
Yeah.
But when we look at the reality inside Red Bull over the past year or so, that statement takes on a very different meaning, I think.
It's a really revealing comment from Horner then, isn't it? Especially when you put it against Red Bull's recent string of, high-profile people leaving and those very public internal controversies.
Exactly.
It definitely makes you question the relationship and trust he's talking about. I mean, we've seen a pretty significant erosion there, haven't we? Almost a talent drain.
It's been noticeable.
Jonathan Wheatley, key operational guy, gone. Dan Fowles, brilliant aerodynamicist, gone. Rob Marshall, crucial engineering mind, gone. And, of course, the big one, the legend, Adrian Newey, the architect of their dominant cars.
Yeah.
Also gone.
These aren't minor changes either. These are big pillars of the team.
Foundational departures, exactly. And beyond those exits, you've had the internal issues playing out so publicly. The whole allegation gate around Horner's own conduct. And the PA gate, those alleged leaked messages related to that situation. Both of those have undeniably contributed to a climate of, eroded trust and instability within the team.
You can't ignore that backdrop.
And some very reputable sources even link the RB21's persistent understeer issues a fundamental car problem and Newey's departure, at least partly, to the turmoil and the fractured environment caused by Horner's conduct.
Right.
So when he talks about a relationship of trust, you have to wonder if he's maybe overlooking the very public reasons why that trust might be fracturing for a driver like Max.
Yeah.
A driver who prizes stability and performance above everything else.
And this whole climate, this mix of internal instability, key people leaving, plus Mercedes' relentless, persistent pursuit of Max Verstappen, it really creates a volatile situation.
Toto Wolff just won't let it go, will he?
Not a chance. Toto, the Mercedes boss, he's been remarkably open about wanting to sign Max for ages. He openly admitted having multiple chats with Verstappen in 2023, specifically mentioned Miami and the summer break.
Right, I remember that.
And while a 2025 switch wasn't seen as feasible then, Toto has this well-documented history of what he calls dropping the ball by not signing the next generational one. Back in 2015.
Clearly talking about Max there.
Oh, absolutely. It's a clear reference to not getting Max into the Mercedes fold earlier. Wolff's often described as having a dog with a bone mentality when it comes to Verstappen.
Yeah.
Once he targets a driver, he just doesn't let go. It's even been suggested, pretty bluntly actually, that he would dropkick George Russell or Andrea Kimi Antonelli, his own promising young star, to get Max's signature if the chance really came up.
Wow, that's brutal.
It is. But the current turbulence at Red Bull, the instability, the perceived dip in their technical foundation, combined with Mercedes' own recent little uptick in performance. Remember, they looked genuinely quick in Canada.
They did, yeah.
And their history of just dominating the last big rule change. The 2014 split-turbo hybrid era, 8 constructors' titles in a row. It really suggests the sea might be parting for Verstappen to Mercedes.
Meaning the path is clearing.
Exactly. The conditions are kind of aligning perfectly for such a massive move. The timing, especially with the 2026 regulations coming up, a new power unit cycle, it could actually be perfect for Mercedes to get back on top with the best driver on the grid.
That's a really compelling case for Max potentially moving. And it actually brings us to George Russell's own comments from Canada, which Ronald Thing highlighted as being, incredibly interesting.
Yeah, those were very carefully worded.
So when Russell was directly asked about his Mercedes contract talks, his reply was, and I'm quoting here, "No real conversations, to be honest, because we've got bigger fish to fry at the moment, which is making our car go faster."
Standard deflection, maybe.
Maybe. Then he added, "I know I'm going to be in Formula One next year. My intention and goal are to stay with Mercedes," and I think that's very much the intention of Toto as well.
Okay, sounds positive on the surface.
It does sound reassuring, right? Loyalty, mutual intent. But then you remember Toto's intentions with Lewis and that whole 1+1 contract, which Lewis ultimately used to jump ship to Ferrari.
Ah, good point. History repeating.
It just makes you wonder if Toto's public intentions sometimes don't quite line up with his tactical moves behind the scenes,
Which raises a critical question for Russell, doesn't it? Why would Toto let a driver of Russell's quality and potential down? I mean, he's a top young talent, capable of leading Mercedes back. Surely why let his contract run so low? No confirmed 2026 deal yet.
Exactly. If he truly wanted him as the long-term undisputed leader.
The fact that this contract situation is even a talking point, especially for a driver who's performed consistently well and is still improving, it kind of implies Toto is still in for Max Verstappen. He's keeping that door propped open.
Makes sense.
And furthermore, and this is a detail Ving pointed out, Russell actually mentioned Max Verstappen without being asked about him by the media.
Oh, really? That is interesting.
Yeah, it's not likely a casual slip-up. It strongly suggests he's very aware of Toto's ambitions regarding Max. Russell then said, but then it's down to you to prove your worth, and followed up with, I've got no concerns.
Right. Projecting confidence.
Exactly. But that unprompted mention of Max, followed by talking about proving his worth, it's incredibly telling, isn't it? It speaks to an underlying tension, a real understanding that his seat might not be quite as secure as his public statements suggest if the Max opportunity were to actually happen.
So he knows the game being played.
He seems to. It hints at an internal awareness of this high-stakes situation. So if Russell says he has no concerns, why might that be?
Okay, so where does Aston Martin fit in again?
Well, the core of the rumor from Ronald Ving is that Aston Martin is keenly interested in George Russell.
Right, the potential landing spot.
And strategically, this makes a ton of sense if Max Verstappen were to go to Mercedes, because then Aston Martin would suddenly find themselves needing a top-tier driver to partner, presumably Lance Stroll, assuming Alonso might leave in that scenario.
And Stroll has the money.
Oh, absolutely. Remember the rumored $1 million contract Aston Martin was supposedly prepping for Max Verstappen? Lawrence Stroll, the owner, clearly has a blank check when it comes to getting top talent for his big project. He's not afraid to spend big.
So what's Aston's motivation for Russell specifically?
It's multi-layered and strong. Firstly, they're confirmed to be running Mercedes power units in 2026 under the new rules.
Ah, the engine connection.
Exactly. Russell's deep familiarity with that power unit, having used Mercedes power his whole F1 career, his understanding of their package, their operational style, it would make him a logical consequence, a really desirable asset.
He could just slot right in.
Pretty much. Hit the ground running with the new regs, bringing invaluable insight and experience directly from the factory team supplying their engines. That could really optimize their chances for success and help cement them as a front-running team.
It is all very strategic, isn't it? Every team playing chess. And speaking of strategy, Mercedes themselves haven't been quiet. They've been busy on social media, tweeting pics of Russell and their young guy, Antonelli, with captions like, "The future is bright."
Yeah, projecting that image of stability.
Clearly implying a continued partnership, trying to look like everything's settled.
Precisely. And this is why you get into the deeper psychological game. Mercedes might actually be delaying Russell's contract purely to create a bit of unease, to subtly destabilize Red Bull, even just by a small percentage.
How so?
By keeping the possibility of a Mercedes seat open for Max. It's a subtle psychological play, right? Creating a narrative of uncertainty around Max's future, even if it's just perception.
Interesting tact.
And interestingly, AMUS, that's Auto, Motor, and Sport, a really respected F1 publication known for accurate paddock info, they predict a new contract for George Russell could actually be announced as soon as Silverstone.
Oh, okay, so maybe it is getting sorted soon.
Could be, making that a critical Grand Prix weekend for driver news. It suggests that while all these rumors are swirling, Mercedes is likely going to lock Russell down for the medium term, even if they're still dreaming of Max eventually.
But there are conflicting reports too, right?
There are. There's another influential perspective from John Noble at Autosport via Cameron CC again. Noble's analysis suggests Russell is actually on shaky ground in the wider driver market, but for different reasons than Ving suggests.
Okay, how so?
Noble points out that Red Bull basically has no room for Russell. They've got their clear number 1 and number 2 structure, Max, as the undisputed number 1. Then drivers like Tsunoda, Perez, Ricciardo, Lawson, all fighting for that second seat.
Right, crowded house there.
And Noble also states that Aston Martin already has Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll under contract for 2026.
So contradicting Ving a bit.
Exactly. Noble says no room for Russell there unless he fancies being a test driver, which, let's be honest, isn't happening for a driver like him.
No.
So this perspective indicates Russell would be better off staying at Mercedes because his options elsewhere might be limited if those top seats are really filled. It definitely contrasts with Ving's view, creating this fascinating, what does this all mean? Moment for us to try and figure out.
So, okay, we have these multiple top sources. Ving suggesting a genuine path for Russell to Aston Martin, Noble arguing his options are actually pretty limited outside Mercedes. How do we square this? What does it all really mean for the driver market and the bigger F1 picture?
Well, I think it means that while the specific outcomes are still, up in the air, the interdependencies are incredibly clear. And the information itself becomes a strategic weapon.
Right, the leaks and rumors themselves are part of the game.
Exactly. Ving's info, coming from the Verstappen camp, might reflect a very real desire from Max's side to explore options, which naturally creates a ripple effect for Russell. If Max is genuinely looking, then Toto Wolff feels obligated to keep that door open, right? Which means Russell's contract talks stay fluid. Noble's analysis, on the other hand, might be based more on the current contractual realities and team structures as they look on paper right now. But we know those can change incredibly quickly with just one big driver move.
Like Hamilton to Ferrari showed us.
Precisely. So what's really insightful here isn't just what's being reported, but how these reports, even conflicting ones like Ving's and Noble's on Russell, become part of the strategic fabric of F1.
Information warfare.
Pretty much. Mercedes might leak one thing to unsettle Red Bull. Russell's camp might leak something else to boost his negotiating power, maybe just to push Mercedes for an earlier, more secure 2026 contract.
It makes sense.
It's a high-stakes game, a chess match where every rumor, every non-committal quote from a driver or team boss becomes a piece in this big strategic maneuver. Ultimately, teams are leveraging every possible angle to get the best talent for the future, especially knowing 2026 is this massive opportunity for a reset on the grid.
So understanding the motivation behind the leaks is as important as the info itself.
I think so, yeah. It's key to seeing the bigger picture.
Okay, that's a great perspective on the information game. Now, let's shift focus. Let's turn to another team that always seems to find itself at the center of F1 drama. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Ferrari.
Ferrari. Never dull.
We have to dive into what feels like a deepening crisis there. Lewis Hamilton hasn't even really arrived at Maranello yet, figuratively speaking, and he's already been reported as asking, where are these upgrades? Are they ever going to arrive for the SF25?
Yeah, the frustration seems palpable already.
Even from someone who won't even be in the car until next year. The reports are just baffling. Yes, upgrades are apparently coming, but for some reason, not for the Austrian Grand Prix.
Which is weird, right? It's close to Italy, usually a good track for quick turnarounds.
Exactly. Instead, they're delayed again. Now expected for Silverstone, maybe even later. And Hamilton's frustration isn't just gossip. In the media pen in Canada, apparently, when asked about upgrades, he replied quite exasperatedly, "We didn't get upgrades, we've not got any." He went on to say he genuinely didn't know why they haven't been brought or when they'll actually show up. That's a pretty significant point of contention for a driver like him, who joined believing in the team's development ability.
Yeah, that does not sound good at all. And the confusion, the frustration within Ferrari, it hints at deeper systemic problems. Ferrari management, not just Vasseur at the track, but higher up reportedly believes the car's potential seen in simulations is not reflected on track.
A classic correlation issue.
Exactly. This gap between the virtual world and the real world has led to this bizarre focus on unlocking the balance of the current car, rather than just getting new parts on it quickly.
Which seems counterintuitive.
It does, and it raises these critical, fundamental questions for a top F1 team. Like, are the drivers suddenly bad? Clearly not. Leclerc and Hamilton are world-class. Are the engineers terrible at setup? Unlikely, given the talent there. Or, and this is the really worrying one, is the simulation just not correlating? Is there a fundamental flaw in their development tools or process?
That would be a massive problem.
Huge. These are foundational issues holding them back, putting them at a massive disadvantage against rivals who do have strong sim-to-track correlation.
And here's the real kicker, the irony, according to Tactical Rab, which really highlights this reactive approach at Ferrari.
Go on.
The team seems to be taking people off 2026 development, which you'd think would be their absolute priority for Hamilton's arrival, to focus on a rear suspension upgrade for 2025.
You're kidding. An upgrade that's already delayed.
Exactly.
What?
An upgrade for this year that's itself delayed. It just suggests this reactive, almost desperate attempt to fix current problems, but at the expense of crucial future development. That really doesn't inspire much confidence for Hamilton's long-term goals or Ferrari's chances under the new regs.
No, that sounds like short-term panic overriding long-term strategy. Which brings us squarely to Fred Vasseur. He seems very much under siege right now.
A tough start for any team principal.
Definitely. His contract, as you mentioned, runs for only another 6 months. That's incredibly short for a team principal at a major F1 team without active renewal talks happening. It absolutely signifies heavy scrutiny from the top.
And Vasseur himself has been making some interesting comments.
Yeah, some very serious statements back at the Canadian Grand Prix. He seemed to imply a deep issue with upper management and the decision-making process within the wider Ferrari structure. He explicitly said, "We've changed the drivers, we've changed the team principals. One thing we haven't changed."
Wow, that's bold.
It's quite something, isn't it? For a team principal whose job is so clearly on the line to make a public comment like that, it's rare. It speaks volumes about the internal struggles and maybe a perceived resistance to fundamental change from the very top of Ferrari.
And Cameron Sari brings in the core issue here, doesn't he? Pointing the finger directly at John Elkann, the CEO of Ferrari Fiat Stellantis.
Yeah, the big boss.
Elkann is reportedly obsessed with poaching from the Bulls, specifically targeting Christian Horner, to potentially supersede Vasseur and take over the F1 team.
That rumor's been around, but did Horner comment?
He did. Christian Horner himself apparently confirmed it wasn't just a rumor that Ferrari had indeed approached him directly.
Wow, okay.
He said he was flattered, but his heart is in Red Bull and he's not going anywhere. But just the fact that Horner confirmed the approach speaks volumes about the high-level interest in replacing Vasseur and maybe the desperation within Ferrari's top brass.
Well, Elkann's concern, even though Horner turned them down, is totally understandable when you look at the numbers at Ferrari's dramatic underperformance.
Yeah, the gap to McLaren is huge now.
Staggering. After just 10 races this season, Ferrari is 77 points behind McLaren in the Constructors. To put that in perspective, they finished the entire 2024 season just 14 points behind the leader.
That's a massive drop-off.
It's not just underperforming. It's a significant regression. Intense underperformance central. The pressure from the very top must be immense. Elkann's clearly looking for a big fix.
And the contrast is even sharper when you look at Ferrari's other big motorsport program, isn't it? Their World Endurance Championship team.
Oh yeah, the WEC guys are flying.
They've absolutely nailed it every single year. Since they entered Le Mans properly in 2023, winning Le Mans in 23, 24, and again just now in 2025 under Antonelli Clita's leadership, it's a completely different story to the F1 team.
Exactly. And that consistent, dominant success in another top-tier motorsport category under the same Ferrari banner just puts even more immense pressure on the F1 side.
You'd think Elkann must be looking at Clita.
Absolutely. You've got to think Elkann will be looking at Clita as a potential Vasseur replacement. The patience of the Ferrari board, and especially the passionate tifosi, will not wait forever.
And the Italian press.
Oh, the Italian press. They love Ferrari, of course. Their fans are incredibly loyal. But they're also going to talk about what gets views. And stories about Vasseur's job being on the line, they seem seemingly founded, which just intensifies the pressure and creates this very public hot seat for him. It's a brutal environment.
Adding fuel to the fire, you have Nico Rosberg, the 2016 world champ, someone who knows what it takes to win an F1, offering some pretty harsh but fair insights into how Ferrari works internally.
Yeah, Rosberg didn't hold back, did he?
Not at all.
He dropped some serious truth bombs based on his own experience competing against them and watching them closely. He flat out said that the level of excellence that they're at is not comparable to British teams, and especially to someone like Mercedes in many areas.
That's a pretty damning statement.
It really is. Suggests a fundamental gap in how they operate. He highlighted the geography factor too, explaining that the whole culture, the fact that they're in Italy, it makes a lot more difficult for them.
In terms of getting talent?
Yeah, attracting and keeping top international talent who might prefer to live and work in the UK's Motorsport Valley cluster.
Okay. And the decision-making?
He drew a really stark contrast there. At Mercedes, he observed, Lewis had a thing, he would just go straight to Toto and Toto would be able to make the decision. Done. No harangue, no bureaucratic red tape. Quick, agile.
Efficient.
Right. But at Ferrari, Rosberg lamented, So many different decision makers. It takes too long to make a decision as far as their organizational structure. He famously called them the Titanic, implying it takes 10,000 years just to right the ship, basically, to change direction or implement new ideas.
Wow, that paints a picture.
It paints a vivid picture of a bureaucratic, slow-moving organization, which is a massive disadvantage in the super fast-paced, constantly changing world of F1 development. It sounds like a deeply ingrained cultural issue.
It certainly sounds like a challenging, almost paralyzing environment to work in. And Hamilton's recent comments in Canada seem to echo some of that, don't they?
They really do.
He said, with this knowing kind of air, if I could tell you what's happening in the background, there's a lot going on. He explicitly stated his goal is long-term success and positively influence the organization. There are a lot of changes to be made.
That clearly suggests he sees big structural and cultural problems that need fixing, and he's not shying away from his role in trying to push for those changes.
He wants to make a difference beyond just driving.
Seems like it. And George Russell, maybe understanding the immense pressure Hamilton puts on himself and his team, offered an interesting take on Hamilton's intensity.
What did he do?
Russell suggested that when you're a 7-time world champion, anything less than victory is failure, and you're probably pushing yourself and your team over the top. It potentially is counterproductive.
Implying Hamilton's pressure might sometimes backfire.
Possibly, hinting that while it's driven by wanting to win, it might sometimes create internal friction or make it hard for the team to adapt quickly. It's an interesting perspective from someone who's worked alongside him.
But Ferrari's CEO, Sincarii, he defended Vasseur recently, didn't he?
He did. Dean Sincarii came out publicly saying, "Let him cook. Let Vasseur work in peace. That's how Ferrari will get back to the top." It's a clear plea for patience and stability, kind of pushing back against that pressure for immediate change.
And Vasseur himself.
Vasseur also made comments about execution matters more than pure potential of the car, which you could read as subtly hinting at driver errors, maybe Leclerc's qualifying mistake in Canada, or Hamilton's run-in with the groundhog.
Trying to shift focus a bit?
Maybe. He also mentioned that upgrades at this stage of the rules are often only hundreds of a second and tenths of a second, perhaps trying to manage expectations about any instant miracle cures from new parts.
And then there's that persistent, really intriguing rumor, the one Rosberg initially leaked, that Ferrari actually considered opening a technical base in the UK, in Motorsport Valley.
Yeah, that rumor keeps popping up, and the logic behind it makes perfect sense. Frankly, it's what many other successful F1 teams have done.
Because all the talent's there.
Pretty much. Being fully based in Italy puts Ferrari at a clear disadvantage for personnel. The hub of motorsport, the biggest concentration of skilled engineers, aero guys, technical staff, is undeniably in the UK, around Silverstone. Many top people prefer to work within that cluster for career reasons, lifestyle reasons.
Makes sense, but they didn't do it.
Exactly. The crucial bit is that the decision from Ferrari's top brass was not to do it.
Why not?
Well, that decision to me is maybe indicative of, perhaps it's a symptom of, the wider, deeper issue at Ferrari right now. A resistance to fundamental change, maybe. A deep-seated traditionalism that prioritizes location and heritage over practical competitive advantage.
Interesting take.
It's a multi-year project to set up a base like that, attract the right people. Even if they started now, it would probably be too late for Hamilton or Leclerc to win a title based purely on that change being fully implemented. It just highlights those deeper systemic, cultural, and operational problems that go beyond specific upgrades or even driver performance. It shows a fundamental difference in philosophy compared to their most successful rivals.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Broaden the view beyond the immediate driver chaos and Ferrari's internal issues. Let's look at some other key developments across the grid and what they mean for the bigger F1 picture. Circling back to Aston Martin, beyond the Russell rumor, what else is notable about their strategic moves for the future?
Oh, Aston Martin is definitely making massive plays. Their ambition to become a championship-winning team seems almost unstoppable right now. The biggest news, obviously, is Adrian Newey.
Right, designing the 2026 car.
He's set to play a central role in designing their 2026 car. That's not just a huge coup, it's potentially a complete game changer for their design capabilities. But maybe even more telling, they've made another incredibly high-profile hire, apparently at Newey's request, Giles Wood.
Giles Wood, what's his background?
Incredible resume. Came from McLaren as their simulation lead, then moved to Red Bull, where he was head of simulation, chief engineer, and technical director. And most recently, he was working at Apple in their autonomous tech division.
Wow, that's quite the CV. From F1 to Apple and back.
Exactly. And this specific hire, especially being linked to Newey's request, really shows the lengths to which Aston Martin are willing to go to build a championship contending team for the new regs.
What does Wood bring specifically?
Unparalleled expertise in simulation and vehicle dynamics, areas that are going to be absolutely critical for the new 2026 technical rules. His experience across multiple top F1 teams, plus that stint at a cutting-edge tech company like Apple, means he's not just a brilliant engineer, he's someone with a broad, innovative perspective. It's an aggressive, incredibly smart move to bring in that kind of top-tier talent and beef up their technical side. It signals serious intent.
Okay, so with all this movement, Newey designing the 2026 car. What about Fernando Alonso? He's still driving incredibly well. Does he stay at Aston Martin to roll the Adrian Newey dice, or could he be looking elsewhere even with Newey coming?
That's a really crucial question, isn't it? Because even with Newey, the driver lineup isn't simple. The speculation, especially from Cameron C., suggests Alonso himself believes it's a very low probability outcome for him to drive alongside Max Verstappen at Aston Martin.
Why is that?
Mainly due to the widely accepted fact of Lance Stroll's guaranteed seat. As the owner's son, his spot seems secure, which limits the available seats for other top drivers.
Right, the Stroll factor.
So if Max, or maybe even George Russell, were to join Aston Martin, Alonso's future there suddenly becomes quite uncertain. He wouldn't want to be pushed out, obviously.
So where else could he go? Alpine.
There's that intriguing possibility, yeah.
Right.
Reuniting with Flavio Briatore at Alpine. Briatore just returned to Alpine in an executive advisor role, and he is, of course, Alonso's longtime manager, instrumental in those Renault championship wins back in '05 and '06.
That history is powerful.
Incredibly powerful in F1. Now, Alonso desperately wants to stay at Aston Martin to 2026 to roll that Adrian Newey dice. Be in the car designed by Newey right from the start of the new regs, because that's often when Newey cars are strongest.
Makes sense.
However, Lawrence Stroll might have different ideas if he's really set on getting a younger top-tier driver like Russell or even Verstappen to lead his team long-term. This could leave Alonso, even with his loyalty and Newey's arrival, looking for other options. And Alpine, despite their current struggles, could be a familiar and viable landing spot. It's a really complex situation for Fernando.
Definitely one to watch. Now, speaking of surprising potential and long-term vision, Williams, a team that's been through some really tough years at the back, they seem to be on a fascinating upward trajectory. What's the outlook there under James Vowles?
Williams is absolutely a team you need to keep an eye on. Their transformation is largely down to James Vowles' leadership, his contract extension, his remarkable transparency with the team and the public, his effective execution. It's systematically turning the team around. They are definitely no longer the laughingstock of Formula One.
They seem much more professional now.
Totally. And what's particularly strategic for Williams and why they might be making such rapid progress is that they are reportedly sacrificing all of the rest of this year to focus intently on next year, specifically on that huge opportunity with the 2026 regulations.
Making smart compromises now for future gain.
Exactly. George Russell, who knows the team inside out, even made a pretty bold prediction, saying via Tactical Rab that Williams have a serious chance to be a contender next year in 2026.
Wow, a contender. That's huge for Williams.
It's a massive statement given their recent history. Now, Vowles himself is more cautious, more realistic in public. He admits they're still a little behind Mercedes in terms of efficiency per minute and production data, basically, how quickly they can design and make new parts.
Okay.
But he does acknowledge significant advantages. Firstly, lower-ranked teams like Williams get more testing time wind tunnel. CFD, which is crucial for developing a brand new car under new rules.
Right, the ATR handicap system.
Exactly. And secondly, there's a strong belief that the Mercedes engine could be the best power unit in 2026. And Williams is a Mercedes customer team.
So, good leadership, more development time, potentially the best engine.
That combination, shrewd leadership, focused development time, and maybe a dominant power unit, it could genuinely position Williams for a really significant leap forward, moving them much closer to the front than anyone might expect. Feels like a quiet revolution happening over at Grove.
Fascinating. Now, opposite end of the spectrum, McLaren. currently showing incredible dominance, leading the constructors by a dramatic lead. They've pulled themselves right up to be genuine contenders again.
Their turnaround has been amazing.
But despite that, there seems to be some pressure building on Lando Norris, especially with his teammate Oscar Piastri performing so strongly alongside him. What's going on there?
Yeah, McLaren's performance has been exceptional. They've clearly built a car that is, on its day, arguably the fastest on the grid. However, Lando Norris has definitely had his struggles when under pressure. He hasn't always capitalized on having what might be the best machine right now.
Like Australia, Canada.
Clear examples, yeah. Australia, a strategic error under the safety car cost him. More recently in Canada, he didn't convert pole or a clear pace advantage into a win. He seems to be grappling a bit with the weight of expectation that comes with leading a top team now.
It's a different kind of pressure.
Totally. It actually brings to mind a comment he made in the past before McLaren's big resurgence. He said something like, "When you got the fastest car, it's easy."
Famous last words.
Maybe. He's now finding out, very publicly, that having the fastest car brings its own unique set of pressures, and it's far from easy to consistently deliver when you're under that intense scrutiny of leading a championship charge.
And the points gap shows it's still open.
Exactly. The current gap in the driver standings, Max, is roughly 40 points behind Piastri. Russell, 60 points behind Piastri, shows the championship is not totally over for Max, and that Norris really needs to iron out these pressure moments. He needs to consistently maximize that car's potential to truly capitalize on McLaren's amazing performance and finally nail down that first win, let alone mount a proper title challenge.
Absolutely. Okay, let's take a quick, interesting tangent for a moment. The Pirelli C6 tire compound. This particular tire, it's caused a lot of chat, some frustration maybe, in the paddock this season. What's the story there?
The C6. Yeah, it's been pretty controversial, almost a headache for the teams, really. They found it quite difficult to unlock its full potential, and it's created some weird strategic situations.
Why? What's wrong with it?
Crucially, it lacks a gap to the C5, meaning it's not consistently quicker by the margin you'd normally expect from the softest compound available.
Right. You want clear steps between tires for strategy.
Exactly. In F1, each tire compound should offer a clear, predictable performance step. That allows for distinct strategic options during a race weekend. When the C6 doesn't give a significant advantage over the C5, it muddies the water, makes tire choices less obvious, and can even push teams into using tires they'd rather avoid.
And it's sensitive too.
Yeah, it's also been described as a bit too sensitive, prone to falling out of its optimal temperature window really easily, which leads to unpredictable performance swings that can catch drivers and engineers out.
So, kind of a mess.
Despite being somewhat of a shambles in terms of its intended performance, it has, paradoxically, created some interesting weekends.
How so?
By influencing strategy in unexpected ways. For instance, some teams have chosen to qualify on the C6 specifically to save their quicker C5s or C4s for the race, knowing the C6 offers little one-lap advantage anyway.
Okay, so an unintended consequence.
Right. Pirelli is now seriously considering either just retiring it for the rest of the season because it's been so problematic, or developing a significantly improved version for next year. They're basically acknowledging it hasn't quite worked as intended.
Interesting stuff. Okay, looking ahead now, there's always buzz about new tracks potentially joining the F1 calendar as the sport keeps expanding globally.
Yeah.
What's on the horizon? Any new venues that might host a Grand Prix in the next few years?
There are a few interesting prospects bubbling up that could reshape the calendar. Firstly, Thailand. They're making a really significant push for an F1 track in Bangkok.
Bangkok, wow.
Yeah, and this isn't just talk. It's backed by a massive $1.2 to $1.3 billion campaign to make it happen. That shows serious financial commitment.
What's driving that? Money, prestige.
Probably a mix. Significant financial resources, obviously, but also likely the potential for sports washing, using big, high-profile events to boost a nation's image on the world stage.
Okay. Anywhere else? South Africa.
South Africa, yeah, with the historic Kalami circuit. It recently got granted FIA Grade 1 status, which is the top certification needed to host F1. However, that status is contingent on planned reforms to the circuit's infrastructure.
So it needs work.
Seems so. The FIA has given them a 3-year window to get those upgrades done, so it's more of a cautious, conditional green light for now.
And Turkey, Istanbul Park.
Istanbul Park, yeah. That's a purpose-built, proper racetrack that F1 used to race at, and it was pretty popular. There's renewed government support there trying to get it back on the calendar for maybe 2027 or 2028.
That would be cool. It's a great track.
It is. But what's notable here, and maybe a bit sad for traditional fans, is that F1 often seems to prioritize these big financial deals, especially from new markets or countries looking for global exposure.
Meaning more street tracks.
It can lead to more Bangkok-style street races, yeah, which are often criticized for maybe lacking the flow and challenge of proper circuits compared to bringing back beloved tracks like Istanbul Park or even a classic like Hockenheim in Germany.
So, money talks.
It definitely seems to be a huge factor in the commercial direction F1 is taking. Balancing the sporting side with global growth and financial opportunities is clearly key for them.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. We've covered so much today. Shocking potential driver moves, deep team crises, even future tracks. The level of flux, the strategic maneuvering in F1 right now is just incredible, almost dizzying to keep up with.
It truly is this constant state of like paradigm shifts where one decision can just send ripples through the entire grid and how quickly things can change both on track and off. It's exactly what makes F1 so captivating, right? But also incredibly challenging for the people inside it.
Yeah, it's be hard to plan.
Exactly. It raises that important question. In such a dynamic, unpredictable environment where your long-term plans can be totally upended by one rumor or one strategic play, how do teams and drivers really plan for the future? Every decision feels like this high-stakes gamble with so many interconnected parts. Foresight feels almost impossible beyond, like, the next few months.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, given all the drama, the speculation, the sheer unpredictability of this F1 silly season, what's one rumor or decision that you think will have the biggest, most unexpected impact on the 2026 grid and beyond?
That's a tough one.
And maybe, are we perhaps witnessing the dawn of a new F1 era, one where team stability is almost an illusion and the real competition is for talent and trust, not just on the track, but behind the scenes in the very structure and culture of these huge operations?
That's a fascinating thought to end on. The battle for trust and talent off track being as important as the on-track fight.
Something for you all to ponder. We will catch you on the next episode of BoxBox. I guess you made it this far, so now would be a great time to like and subscribe. Thanks it for now, and we will see you on the next one.